Firstly, thank you very much, Steve, for giving me opportunity to interview you for my YouTube channel and podcast.
You're very welcome. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you started doing this and how
Definitely,
you picked me and everything else.
definitely. Before talking about it, can you please introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. My name is Steve Hartel. I live in the United States in the Denver, Colorado area. I am an investment advisor and I help individuals and business owners with sort of all things financial. Uh-oh, let's see. There we go. Cool.
Awesome. So, you started doing this from?
Oh my goodness. So I've been a finance guy my whole life. I went to college and got an undergrad degree in business. And the part of business that I liked the most was finance. And so I went and got an MBA, a master's degree in finance. And then I started out as a corporate financial analyst, and I was working for a telephone company in the telecom industry. Um, and I did that for, gosh, 20 something years. And I guess two things happened. One, I was just burned out on corporate life in general. And I think I wanted a smaller feel, just a different environment. And then, secondly, the telecom industry, at least in the United States, during the time I was there, went through all sorts of exciting and volatile regulatory changes. And it was very exciting times to be there. But then we got past that. And the last 5 or 6 years I was working, I was just, this is boring. I don't like this anymore. So at that point, I decided I was too old to go back to school. I didn't like the idea of that. And so it just made sense to jump over the fence onto the personal side of finance. And I tried several different flavors of that. I did some project management, I did some software consulting, I did some consulting for other investment advisors. Worked for some big companies, worked for some small companies, and ultimately decided I was going to try the advisor space where I'm sitting across from a client and kind of helping them one-on-one. And that's what I liked the best out of all of them. And I've been doing that for, this is my 13th year of that.
So, financial thing, which is why the reason an individual or a company works for.
Do you repeat that?
So, financial aspect is for which an individual or a business work for. So, which is a very mandatory thing.
Yes, yes. So I am not self-employed. I do work for a company that does financial planning, and we do investment management, and we do financial planning, and we do retirement income planning, and we help people identify what the important goals are in their life and then figure out how to pay for all of those and how much that's going to take and how long and whether any of that's realistic, and how much risk do they want to take, and are they being smart about their taxes and their estate planning and all sorts of other things. So we just really try to provide a counseling environment or a coaching environment around all things money related.
So, what is the big number that you work for?
A big number?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, when I was young, like in my 20s, I used to think that once I had saved up $1 million, that I'd be able to quit work forever. And I didn't get to that number when I was young, but I did eventually get to that number. And I realized that with inflation and everything else, that $1 million isn't a big number anymore. I mean, really. Um, so that was one that I worked towards.
So, understanding finances of an individual or a company. So, you're doing this for a long time. So, uh, what do you understand about the whole aspect in the industries or in the entire world?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, I think like any industry, it has gone through a lot of changes, and I can't speak for other countries. I haven't really studied their systems, and I'm only licensed to operate in the United States. So, in our industry, if you wanted help with investments, if you wanted to open any kind of an account and somehow or other invest in stocks or bonds or anything like that, you went to a stockbroker, and the broker charged you a commission every time you bought or sold something. And that's just the way it was. And then eventually people realized that when my broker calls and says, "Hey, Steve, we need to sell this other thing we bought last time. And instead, we're going to buy some shares of this new company called XYZ." And people started to realize that, was my broker calling me with that because this really was a better investment, or because the broker needed some money and it was time to generate a commission, right? So there was kind of this built-in conflict of interest where if you're a broker, the only way you get paid is if somebody buys or sells something. And so your incentive is to have people buy or sell something. And that may or may not be in their best interest. And so you don't want to be a complete schmuck about it. And you don't want to violate any laws. But at the same time, if that's your role, it's really hard to tell a client, "Hey, all those investments that we picked out and that I'm helping manage for you, they're all doing great. We don't need to make any changes." Because that doesn't get me paid if I'm the broker, right? So eventually, more and more of the industry got away from that, and we now tend to charge people more based on the size of the portfolio. And we think that more closely aligns our interest with the client's interest. So if I'm charging a flat percentage of your account, no matter how big or small it is, let's say 1%, then if I do a really good job for you over time and your account gets bigger and bigger, I'm getting 1% of a bigger and bigger number. So that helps me. And your account is getting bigger. So that helps you. So we're aligned. And if I do a crappy job and your account gets smaller and smaller and smaller, my fee goes down. And so that hurts me. And it also hurts you because your account is getting smaller. And so it's not a perfect system. I mean, as an advisor, I have absolutely no control over whether the market goes up or down. I just have to use all of my training and education and experience to try and be prepared and best take advantage of whatever it is the market decides to do. But it's the best system we've come up with so far, and I like it. And then there are other times where if a client wants something that's more like a project, maybe they have a really big decision they're trying to make. So I had one of these a couple of months ago. Client was in his mid 50s, and he had always worked for large companies, and he got laid off during this pandemic. And he was thinking maybe it was time to open a business himself and run a business. But he didn't really have the skills for that. So he was thinking maybe he would buy a franchise. And he looked at a lot of different franchise opportunities. He looked at food things, like buy a McDonald's. And he looked at just lots of different opportunities. And he found this one that he liked. But in order to buy into that franchise and have them help him set up a store, he needed $40,000. And the only place he had $40,000 was in one of his retirement accounts. And he was counting on that money to help pay for his retirement. And he was really torn. He didn't know how do I analyze this? How can I tell if this would be a smart thing or not? And so he hired me to help him figure that out. And so in that case, there aren't any investments, and we just charge a sort of a project-based fee. And in his case, it took us a good couple of months to really figure out whether that was going to be a smart thing or not. And I charged him, I think it was $1,800 or $1,900 to do that project. So there's different ways for somebody like me to get paid, but the primary one is either we're getting paid for our advice. I guess the primary two. We're either getting paid for our advice or we're getting paid to manage a portfolio of investments.
So you are a wealth advisor and a registered financial planner, and you are in this position from last 12 plus years.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how's your experience?
Sure. So the term, at least in the United States, the term financial advisor doesn't have an official definition, and there are no real rules or regulations about who can call themselves a financial advisor. And so it's almost, I guess this expression won't mean anything to your non-American audience, but it's like the Wild West in the United States. That was a significant portion of our growing up. It was the cowboys time period, and there were just sort of no rules. And so the term financial planner, there are regulations about that. And there are only two categories of people that can call themselves legally financial planners. And one of them is you go take a bunch of classes and study, and you pass an exam, several exams, that allows you to become a certified financial planner, a CFP. And I'm pretty sure that designation exists worldwide. Those people can call themselves financial planners. And then the other group, which is the way I went, they take a different set of classes and study. It's just sponsored by a different organization. They take a bunch of exams, and they get licensed or registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, or now in the United States we call it FINRA. And that's the way I went. And so I am a registered financial planner. And the way I think of the difference is, if your only designation is the certified financial planner, you can charge people a fee for creating a plan, but you can't help them do it. They have to do it all by themselves. So it would be like maybe if I ran a travel agency and you came to me and you said, "Hey, Steve, um, I think I want to go to France. I've heard really great things about the country France. Can you put a good agenda together and come up with hotels where I should stay and restaurants I should eat and maybe some sites I should see?" And I could gather a whole bunch of brochures and write a bunch of that down, and I could charge you a fee, and I could hand you those brochures and say, bye, have a nice trip, hope it works out. That's kind of what a certified financial planner can do. And I wanted to be more like somebody who could not only put all those things together, but that I would come along with you and be your tour guide in France. And so I would make those reservations for you, and I would, get a taxi and drive you over to the restaurant and all that sort of stuff. And so in the financial world, the equivalent of that is if you want a retirement account, or we decide you need a retirement account, I can open that for you, whereas a certified planner can't. All they can do is tell you that that's what you should go do on your own. So I liked that approach better, and that's why I chose to be a registered financial planner instead of a certified financial planner. And then, as it turns out, if you want to, you can be both. And so at my company, I've got some people who started out as certified planners, and then they didn't like the fact that they couldn't open an account for you or place a trade for you or actually manage a portfolio for you. So they went down the registered road and became registered. So they have both of those things. And I never felt the need to get that other side. Everything I need to do, I can do. And I get to help people with investments, cash flow, budgeting, saving for college, saving for retirement, life insurance, different kinds, how to know how much, how to protect your assets, how to know and measure how much risk you're taking, how much risk is appropriate for different things, how much cash you ought to keep in the bank. So all of those things are what I like to do. And I wish it paid better. I don't make a whole lot of money doing that. But I certainly enjoy helping people. It's one of the reasons I chose this profession in the first place. Was I really enjoy sitting across a table or a Zoom screen, or I guess today it's a Skype screen, and talking with somebody and getting to know them and figuring out what's important and being able to educate them about how to get wherever it is they want to go and how to help implement that. And then it's even more satisfying to me a year from now when we sit down again together and we're doing an annual review and we're able to say, oh my gosh, look how far you've come. Look at the progress you made. Or, every now and then, look at these mistakes we made. Let's make sure we don't do those again, right? But so that's kind of my experience. Is I love it. I'm probably going to keep doing it until I eventually retire someday. I just wish I made more money at it.
Any particular project that you planned for that you enjoyed a lot?
Well, the vast majority of clients seek out somebody like me while they're still working, so they haven't retired yet. And usually the most complicated thing that they have in front of them, whether they're in their 20s or whether they're in their 50s, is how in the world am I going to retire? And nowadays, it's very common for people to retire in their mid 60s and still live until their mid 90s. So that's 30 years without a paycheck. And by the way, inflation doesn't just stop, right? So your income needs are going to slightly grow each of those 30 years. How in the world do you plan for that and know how much you're going to need and how much you can live on, and how do you keep it safe? The stock market crashes every so often, and how do you make sure that that doesn't devastate you? And so in general, I enjoy retirement planning for clients. But almost any project really. Sometimes I'll get young parents who've just had a baby, or maybe they've got a couple of young kids, and they're talking about, what if my child wants to go to college or university? And oh my God, that's so freaking expensive. How are we going to pay for that? And so that's something I can help somebody with. And then once I show them how to do that, often what we discover is in order to pay for the kind of college that they'd love to send their kid to, they need to be saving, I'm just going to make up a number here, $500 a month. And in order to not live in a cardboard box when they retire, they need to be saving $600 a month. So to do both of those things, you need $1,100 a month. And most of the time, clients, when they first say, I want this and I want this, they don't understand how expensive some of those things are. And so then what happens is I tell them, and they're like, well, but I don't have $1,100 a month extra. I got to pay for my rent or the mortgage, and I got to buy groceries and the car and all that. I've only got $800 that maybe I could possibly spare. So what do I do now? And so then we have to work with them and figure out, maybe you don't live quite as nice of a lifestyle in retirement. Maybe if you were planning on really doing, lots of traveling around the world or something, maybe that's not realistic. Maybe you can't afford that because you're not Bill Gates. You don't have billions of dollars. Or maybe we decide that you, as the parents, can't afford to pay for 100% of your child's college, but maybe it would be good if the kid got a part-time job and helped, had a little skin in the game. So maybe we don't need as much for that one. Or maybe if these two things are still super important for you and you can't afford them, is there a way you can increase your income? If you don't love your job, is there something else you might consider doing that pays more? So there's lots of ways to solve those, but in general, those are the kinds of projects I like.
Have you worked for IT company?
Have I worked for
IT, information technology company or individual?
No, I have not. I have worked when I was a corporate financial analyst. I was always somehow or other in the telecommunications industry, usually for some kind of a telephone company. And then when I started doing the personal side of finance, I have worked for very large companies. Like I worked for a while for Fidelity Investments. I'm sure your audience has heard of them. And I've worked for little tiny mom and pop companies that nobody's ever heard of other than me. And the company I work for now is a medium-sized company. But I've always been in the financial services area, not really any other industry, so I've never worked for an IT company or a construction company or a food company or anything like that. It's always been some kind of a financial services company.
So what exactly influences in making wealth or creating wealth? Human have mental energy, physical energy. So with this,
Yeah, I think if I were trying to give somebody advice on how to create wealth, the things that come to mind are, first of all, it's never quick unless you're just one of those few lucky people that you bought a lottery ticket one day and all of a sudden you have a ton of money, or you were lucky enough to be born to parents who already had lots of amazing wealth, right? Your parents were Bill and Melinda Gates, or the Rockefellers, or somebody with more money than God. No disrespect there. So it takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes a plan. I have met many people who have become clients who said, Steve, I always thought that only rich people needed an advisor. And now that I've had a chance to work with you, I realize that's not true. Everybody needs a plan. Whether you make $1 million a year or whether you make $10,000 a year, you still need to be smart about how to spend that money or how to save it and how to not give any more of it away to taxes or other things than you need to. And so having a plan and sticking to it and developing habits. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that hypothetically, this husband and wife, mother and father who had a new child, that if they wanted the kind of college they wanted to pay for was going to be $500 a month they needed to save. If I have a client who doesn't have $500 a month, but they could do $40 a month, to me, it's more important to start them on the $40 a month so that they develop that habit, and then slowly but surely they'll begin to see that account is growing, and they'll also see how slowly it's growing compared to what they were hoping for, because they're only putting in $40 a month. And initially they thought, oh, this $40 a month, my God, that's going to be so hard. And then after they've been doing it a few months, they realized they made a couple of adjustments about how they spend the rest of their money, and maybe they're not going out as often to restaurants, or they're spending a little less money on food or a little less on clothes, or whatever. And all of a sudden it doesn't hurt anymore. And so it's time for us to do a quarterly review. And I'm like, all right, we've been doing $40 a month for a while. Do you think you could handle 60? And, so you start wherever you can, and then you just keep ratcheting it up, and eventually you'll get there. If your goal is realistic, eventually you'll get there, right? If your goal is to retire at age 40 with $10 million, it's physically impossible to get there on $40 a month, right? That's just mathematically never going to happen. But as long as it's a realistic goal with discipline and commitment, and somebody like me helping you along the way and showing you the right habits and trying to keep you from doing anything too stupid, and being a cheerleader for you, and helping you recognize when you did a smart decision, and pat yourself on the back for that. That was really smart. Um, you know, I think all of those things together, anybody could have wealth, because wealth doesn't have a set definition, right? Your definition of wealth may not be the same as mine. Sort of like happiness, right? Like what makes me happy might not make you happy, and maybe the opposite. But we can do different things and still both be happy.
So, in your experience, what most of the most of the people thought that this is what wealth is.
I think if I were a real idealist, I might say that a person's definition of wealth doesn't even need to include money. But I honestly can't say that. I think if I were to grab 100 people randomly from around the globe and ask them, what does the word wealth mean to you? We'd get lots of different definitions, but I think every single one of them would be based on the idea of having some amount of money. So I, I, I think if I did the same thing and asked people to define happiness or success, I think we'd get quite a few of them who wouldn't say anything about money. You'd still get a lot of people who define everything by money, right? I'm not happy if I don't have money. I'm not a success if I don't have lots and lots of money. But I think plenty of other people recognize that that's not an intrinsic value, right? If the things that are important to you are love and family and hard work and progress, that you can have those things with or without money. And sometimes they're easier with money. But I feel sorry for the people who just think that it's impossible to be happy or successful without having lots of money. Because I've met plenty of people who don't have lots of money, and they're the happiest and some of the most successful people I've ever met. So it's all about, what's going on in here and what do you value, and are you living your life according to those values, or are you just trying to be what everybody else says you're supposed to be, or what your society says you're supposed to be, or what your parents told you was important, right? I wish we could fix that system. Somehow, almost everything that most people learn about money, they don't teach that crap in school. They learn it from their parents, and their parents didn't learn it in school either. And so I've got to be honest. I think most people have a very warped sense of money. And that's an aspect of my job that I enjoy as well, is being able to educate people about that's, in some cases, that's not how money works, or that's not how people get rich, or gee, yeah, you're right, that amount of money would be helpful, but that's not really why you're doing it, right? You're doing it because you told me that you'd like to have someday a house with your wife and a couple of kids, and it would have a yard big enough for a dog. And the only way to get that is to have a certain amount of money. So the money itself wasn't the goal. The having a house with a yard for a dog and a place for your child to play in, that's what was really important to you. We just need money to make that happen, right? So,
Which industry in the world is making more money?
mm, that's an interesting question. I think there are certain professions that tend to always make more money. I think here in the United States, if you are a doctor, or particularly if you are like a surgeon or some real specialist, a brain specialist or a heart doctor, those people make a lot of money. Now, on the other hand, the schooling that they had to go through, they probably spent 5 times the money on their education than I had to pay for mine. And so they almost need that much money just to live the same life I do, because they're still paying off all the money that they needed to have, all the money they borrowed in order to pay for medical school, as an example. And on the opposite side of that, I think there are some professions that everybody just knows you're not going to make a lot of money ever doing that, right? But school teachers used to be that way and still largely are, but we've made a lot of progress there. If you're a really good quality school teacher, at least here in America, you can eventually make decent money. But when you first start out, when you're a school teacher who's 20 something years old, you're barely above the poverty line. And then if I think about industries, that changes over time. So right now, as a planet, we've got to figure out how to stop using so much fossil fuels, and we've got to move towards greener energy, and we got to figure out how to clean up all the pollution, or else we're all going to die. The planet's not going to be able to sustain us. So I think for the next 50 years, industries that are involved with that, electric cars, solar, wind power, solid state batteries, lithium batteries, all those kinds of things, I think those are going to be industries that make a lot of money. Your traditional auto mechanic who changes the oil in your car and gives your engine a tune-up, that's a dying profession, right? So those people are going to make less and less, and then pretty soon we're not going to need them at all when we're all driving electric cars or whatever it is that'll come after electric cars. So I don't think there's a set answer to that, but I think at any moment in time, you can just sort of look around at what's going on in the world and what are the up and coming industries, what direction are we going, what directions used to be great but probably aren't going to continue to be great, and there's probably some that used to be great and they'll continue to be great. And I'm sure that varies as well from country to country, right? So I talk about here in America how doctors make oodles of money, and I have no idea if that's the same in India or other parts of the world, but that's my American view.
Educated or uneducated? Who are making more?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. I couldn't hear that.
Educated or uneducated? Who are making more?
As a group, educated. definitely. Initially, like I can remember when in the United States, when you graduate from high school, you're about 17 or 18. And if you don't go to college or university, you get a job as a construction worker or a truck driver or a plumber or whatever, and somebody else who does go to college for 4 years and then gets a white collar job, right? They're an office worker somewhere. The manual labor will be making way more money initially. But over time, the person with the education, their income will pretty much continue to rise for most of their life at a steeper pace than a manual laborer will. Their curve is going to be flatter and not as many opportunities for increasing. So when you look at that whole picture, educated definitely makes more money than not.
So for an individual or for a company, what are the things that influences in increasing the value?
Mm. I think companies that ultimately succeed are solving some sort of a problem. And the better you can do that and the more efficiently you can do that, the more value there is. And then, I'm going to think about cars, automobiles, right, as a transportation. So people have this need. They got to get from point A to point B. They could walk. If there's happens to be a train, they could do a train. If there are roads, they could do a bus maybe, or they could have a car. And so the companies that made cars were solving that problem, and they did really well initially. And then they sort of went through this learning phase, at least here in the United States, where they started trying to make the cars fancier and fancier and more expensive. And they started putting all these really cool but expensive features on them that didn't have anything to do with getting from point A to point B. They were just about either being cool or status symbols, or in some cases they made it more comfortable to get from point A to point B, right? So if it's the middle of summer and your car has air conditioning and it's a 3-hour drive from point A to point B, then yeah, air conditioning is really great, and that has a lot of value, and you'd be willing to pay for that. But if the car costs, $1,000 more because they wrapped the steering wheel in some really cool kind of leather, for most people, that's just not a good trade-off, right? Most people are like, I'd rather spend the $1,000 on gas or oil or going out to dinner. That, I don't necessarily care about what sort of leather that went into the steering wheel, as long as it doesn't hurt my hands when I grab it. So here in the US, the auto industry went through a huge slump and crash where the American marketplace, the buyers, decided you guys aren't providing value anymore. And that's when European and Asian cars and Japanese cars became so popular in America. Is the perception was, for the same amount of dollars, those countries are giving me a car that has way more value than you guys here in America are. And so, General Motors, which was our largest automaker, actually had to file bankruptcy not too many years ago, and they had to reorganize themselves and kind of reinvent who General Motors was and get back to that. We're not providing value if we're not actually solving a problem. So I think that's probably the best gauge of whether you as a person or whether a company provides value is, are you solving somebody's problem?
So, what do you say about the top wealth creators or wealth creating companies in the world? What do you think that is working for them?
Um, I think in most cases, it's a combination of things. They've got a product or a service that solves a problem that people are willing to pay for, and they have figured out how to deliver that product or service at a fair and reasonable price. And in today's world, I think the companies that are doing the best are the ones who have figured out that they need to take care of their employees and treat them well. Because if they don't, then the company's not as efficient. There's a lot more turnover. People quit. People in the factories just throw things together without trying to make it high quality because they don't care anymore. And the companies that are really successful, I think, are doing all of those things together.
So, you're observing and you're understanding the wealth and the finances from long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
so how the wealth will be created and how it will be managed?
Mm. I'm not sure that the answer to that is really any different than it has been in the past. Wealth gets created when you are able to set aside some of your resources and set them aside in a way where they can grow over time. So, in the most simple sense, if it takes every penny that you earn at your job to pay for housing and food, um, then um, and you have zero money left the day before each payday, you're going to be able to create wealth. But if you can figure out a way to take some of that money and save it, even if it's just in a savings account at the bank or a cookie jar buried in the backyard that you don't dig up unless it's an absolute emergency, um, wealth gets created slowly over time, and it takes advantage of compound interest growth. So if you've ever had a chance to look at a graph of linear growth versus compound interest growth, I believe it was Einstein who said they should have called compound interest the ninth wonder of the world. But it starts slowly at first, and then it has a really steep curve, but not until way out there. I think the best example I can give you of this is one I do whenever I get an opportunity. I like to go into schools and teach kids about money. And I have an example that I use with kids. And so in our case, the United States dollar is made up of 100 pennies. And I will ask the kids and I say, all right, if we start the beginning of the year on January 1st and you have 1 penny, and then the next day it doubles and you have 2 pennies, and then the next day it doubles again, you get 4 pennies, and then 8 and 16 and 32 and 64. And then finally you break a dollar. You got $1.28, right? So really slow. You go your first week, you don't even have $1 yet. So I'll ask the kids, if it keeps growing at that 50% every day compound rate, how far into the year do you think you'd have to get before you had $1 million? And the kids will say, oh, you'll never get there with pennies, or gosh, maybe all the way till December at the end of the year, or maybe July, right? But the answer is the 28th of January, because it just looks so slow in the beginning, but once you start to hit that steep part of the curve, you get massive gains in short amounts of time. And unfortunately, there's no real way to shortcut that. Unless you've just already got lots of money. And, that's one of the reasons that the people who do already have lots of money are able to get wealthier and wealthier, is even when they're on the shallow part of the curve, instead of going from 1 penny to 2 pennies, they're going from $1 million to $2 million. So makes a difference. But I think the people who can set aside on a regular basis some amount of money and either take a ton of time yourself and learn about finances and the market, or work with some sort of an advisor, some sort of expert who can give you guidance and advice, that's how wealth happens.
You are an instructor and a range safety officer.
Yes. So this may be controversial for some of your audience. I don't know, depending on where they're from. But one of the things that I do for fun is I like to go target shooting with firearms, rifles and pistols and shotguns. And almost 30 years ago, I was having so much fun with that I went and got myself certified as an instructor. And I've now been an instructor for 28 or 9 years. And so I have a part-time job at a local gun range in my city. And I get to teach classes to people who want to come and learn how to be safe with a firearm. I get to teach kids. I get to teach adults. I get to teach people who've never touched a gun before. I get to teach advanced skills for the people who use a lot. And so I mentioned that I don't make as much money at being an advisor as I would like. And one of the things I do to overcome that is I took a hobby of mine and turned it into a second income. So, but I enjoy that as well. It's a ton of fun.
Before that, you worked as a director, relationship and implementation project manager.
That was a really interesting thing. That's when I worked for the biggest financial company out there, Fidelity Investments. And it turns out that when you're somebody like you or me and you want some help with your finances, you go to somebody like me who is a financial advisor of some kind. And but if you're somebody like Bill Gates or the Rockefellers, you know, your family just has lots of money. You don't just want to go to a company like I work for and be a client. You want somebody whose entire full-time job is managing your family's money. And that role is what we call a family office. And it doesn't make sense to hire a family office until you've got $200 or $300 million of investments. So that's the scale we're talking. And there are a surprising number of families worldwide who have that much money. And you've only heard of a small number of them, those that ended up in the public limelight, like Gates and Rockefeller and Jeff Bezos from Amazon and whoever else. But most of those people, nobody knows they're rich, and they work really hard to keep it that way. And they may have one person managing their money. They might have 20 people in a company managing their family's money and keeping it a secret. And when you're doing money management on that scale, there are different needs, and way more of it needs to be computerized and automated. And Fidelity Investments was trying to create a software program that could do all of that. And they were going to try to go sell it to as many of these family offices as they could find. And so I joined Fidelity and got hired into that unit because I knew a lot about managing money. And in particular, I had a lot of software experience with managing money. I just didn't have it on that scale. And so my role as a project manager was, it was virtually impossible to design a piece of software right out of the gate that would work for everybody. So they just sort of had a bare bones skeleton kind of structure. And then each client, each family office, we would look at what they needed and we would add some more to the program so that it could do what they needed. And we'd cross our fingers and hope that there was somebody else out there that would need those same things. And so in the early stages, we only had, 3 and then 5 and then 6. And by the time I was done, I worked there 3 years. I think we had up to 12 clients, 12 of those family offices. And my job as a project manager was, whenever the sales guys would get one more family office to agree to try our software, I would get to go out and sit with that family office for a week and learn, how do you guys do it? What data do you need? How are you handling it now? What software do you use? How much of it is manual? Do you have a bunch of different programs that you're using for different things? When the family members, Mr. and Mrs. person, when they come in, what kind of questions are they asking you? And what's important to them? And, if our tool could do exactly what you need it to do, what would that be? And so I would take a week interviewing those people and gathering all that information. And then I would come back to Fidelity and I would meet with all of the programmers and tell them, this is what this client needs. How do we make that happen? And, I mentioned earlier, I'm not an IT person, but so I would manage this team that was mostly IT people out there making this software do what it needed to do. And then once they thought they had it up and running, I would get a chance to go back out to the family office and install it and teach them how to use it and sort of give them the keys and walk away. So it was very exciting. I loved it. I got to meet all kinds of cool people. Almost every single time I went to a family office, I couldn't walk in the door before I signed 10 or 12 secrecy documents swearing that I would never reveal names or pet names or occupations or anything that I might learn about the Rich family, because that I mentioned earlier, secrecy was so important to them, right? They're worried about their kids getting kidnapped on the way to school because somebody found out they're super rich, so I'm going to kidnap their kids and try and get a ransom. Because I know this family has lots and lots of money. And, who needs to live with that? So that's one of the reasons the secrecy was so important, is they were just literally worried about the safety of the family members. But that was a fun job. It just didn't last. At the end of the third year, it turned out the way they were building this software, kind of one new capability at a time, it just got too clunky, and pretty soon the hardware couldn't run it fast enough, and we had to buy bigger, fancier supercomputers, and then even they couldn't keep up with it. And ultimately, Fidelity pulled the plug on that idea and shut that business unit down. But it was a lot of fun. I learned a tremendous amount.
And you worked as a consultant at Advanced Software and Investment Management.
Yeah, nothing exciting there. They were using a particular piece of software that kept track of all of their client portfolios. They had hundreds of clients, and they needed a way to run reports and see what was going on in all of those clients at the same time. And there was already a piece of software out there that did that. And I happened to have some experience with it from a previous job. And so they just hired me to help teach them how to use that software. And I did that for 2 or 3 different companies.
Before that, you worked as a Director of Investment Management Services, registered investment advisor.
Nothing too exciting there. It was a small company, like 5 employees, and they were certified financial planners. So they were charging to put a plan together and hand it to you. And they were recognizing that there was also money to be made if they could manage the investments. And I had just been working for a company that only managed investments. They didn't do any financial plans. And this little company hired me to help them launch investment management as a line of business, and teach them how to do that on top of just writing financial plans, and how to coordinate those two, right? If you're not, if your plan says your goal is this, but the way you're managing the investments is that, you're not going to get there, right? Those two things need to be coordinated.
So, do you want to ask anything to me?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I want to know, what do you do? What's your profession?
I've done my master's in software engineering and bachelor's in
Okay.
computer science and engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And I have two YouTube channels and two podcasts where I interview different country people who are into different professions and who are into who are into different age groups, who came from different backgrounds, and yeah, completely different mindsets. People who have completely different work experiences. Especially, I'm from tech industry, so I'm trying to uh, interview tech people
Mm-hmm.
and also experts like you who are who understand the major things in the industry and the important things in creating wealth.
Cool, cool. Sounds fun. Um, I assume that's just something you do for fun or because you like it, right? I mean, that's, or are you making a living somehow doing these podcasts?
Uh, in coming days, if I start working in IT industry in a position, I want to use this complete experience. Like I did, I took interviews of people about 460 in last 1 year. Like
Mm-hmm.
daily 2 to 3 experts I'll talk and I'll try to understand how they are solving problems and how they are making things possible and in that particular year in that particular job role how they solved in that project. So I'm trying to ask what they did in their experiences and trying to relate with what I'm thinking. And I want to put all this complete knowledge and information if I work in a company or if I work for a role.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, so if I were the president of some big computer company, IBM, and I said to you, hey, I want you to come work for me. What is it you'd like to do? So if you could sort of pick any any job opening, what do you think you want to do?
I'll say I want to solve problem and I want to know what is the problem and I want to see what exactly is creating effect or creating uh, impact. I want to
Mm-hmm.
create energy. I want to understand the user's experiences about that particular product that we are going to produce or make and how that is going to create how many people are going to use what we are going to create. It can be a product or service like you said in the beginning. If we
Right.
are if our company is a product based company, our product should reach a maximum number of people in the world. uh, in order to make that we have to create something which connects with everybody and which should not harm any industry like any not environment,
Mm-hmm.
climate, or creatures, human beings. It should be user friendly and should be nice. And other than that, uh, we should understand the experiences of people who already use that kind of product that we created.
Cool. So you're not one of these computer guys that just wants to sit in a room in front of a terminal and write computer code all day.
I'm a software engineer. I do that, but other than that, I'm doing these conversations, which means this is not my job, but I created this job for myself in order
Mm-hmm.
to understand what entire
Right.
planet is. Because someday when I come to your age, I have to think about the planet. What if I start in this age? I'll have 30 more years in my hand, good mental and physical energy in order to, give the better thought, the quality
Mhm.
thought, or the experienced thoughts with which we can grow plants, which is wealth. We can create products. We can create so many jobs, or we can create uh, anything with the thoughts that I collected from all these different sources of uh, different sources. Like Poland
Mhm.
person says something that European won't say, or
Mhm.
Russian says something that UK person don't say. So trying to connect with all the different mindsets, and I'm also trying to prove that a human from a particular part of the world can able to connect and communicate and establish connection and able to manage things. Uh, uh, I never saw this kind of thing on the internet, so I want to do it.
I think that's great. Do you speak different languages, or have you had to just limit yourself to people who could speak English?
I speak Telugu, Hindi, and English. I know three languages, and I can
Okay,
write, speak. Yeah, I'm
that's
using all
great.
the three different mediums in the internet. We have a podcast for audio people who wants to just listen when they are going in the car.
Mhm.
Who wants to listen to my episodes, they can listen it on my podcast. And people who are a visual people, like who wants to sit and watch our conversation, like what Steve is saying. So I want to see him directly. I want to see his expressions.
Yeah,
So for them, YouTube channel is there, and uh, I have websites. I have my personal blogs. One is technical, another is non-technical, where I'll write and send explain something that I learned on that
that's
day.
great.
So all the three communication mediums. So trying
Yeah,
to connect with different country people, and it worked for me. I
cool.
tried it. It worked.
do do they have has technology come far enough that you could use some sort of a real time translator? So like if that person in Poland only spoke Polish, could you ask your question in English and then they'd hear it in Polish and they'd answer and then you'd hear the English version back? Or is that just too awkward?
So um, the point that you said that already has been started in the technology, and we are very far. I mean, we came very far. If we see in the 1990s, from 2000, the
Mhm.
technology has grown very fastly and advanced very well. So it improved. It is saving a lot of humans' mental and physical energy and efforts. And the translation is, there are a lot of softwares already in the computer, or a lot of companies from uh, uh, different countries are making so many softwares. Like I took interview of a person, who is a CEO of a company, and he's from European countries, and he created a software with which he can get back the 1980s and 70s musical instruments sounds,
Mhm.
with which today they can create the music directors of the movies, or
Oh, how
they can
cool.
use that particular software, and it is 99% matching with the sound is matching with that. So that is something that is recreated. He called
Mhm.
that as a recreated music sound. So that is the point that you said, that is called as automation, which
Mhm.
means instead of human, a software or a device will translate it and convert it, and give the output in the form that we can understand. that is called as artificial intelligence. That
Mhm.
is already
Yeah.
there, and that is AI. Google is using AI,
Mhm.
and Microsoft is using AI, and so many companies have started using AI in different ways. And I'm sure in coming days, AI is going to uh, be used in all the industries,
Mhm. Yeah.
which will.
Have you been able to personally use any as you've interviewed people like me to help you communicate with somebody who doesn't speak your language?
Mostly English is a universal language. Like
Mhm.
everybody can speak English. Almost everybody are very good in English. But what I observed is US English is different from British English, and Poland English is different, and African English, and Russian English. Australian English is completely different. It is east part of the world. So Americans are like west part of the world. So
Mhm.
when I see my own videos, me talking with the CEO of a company who is from Australia, who owns a chopper, who owns a own um, company, internet company, who is very rich guy, how the way he's talking is completely different from the guy who is like completely west. They are very very the sound, the way they use the words, the sounding is very very different. So what I
Mhm.
understood is a lot of people got shocked. Like I took interview of a woman who is from Germany, and she is a communication specialist. So she asked me a question like what she wants to know. She is interested in how I'm able to connect and communicate and understand. So I said we have two senses, like five senses we have. If you are able to use it effectively and efficiently, we can understand anything in the world. There is no such thing that we cannot understand. I'm trying to, when you're talking in this conversation, I'm just trying to listen. I'm just concentrating on each word that you are using. So
Mhm.
every word has meaning. So that is a
I think
very
that's great. That's great. And the last thing is when something that you sent me listed your location as, and I'm sure I'm not going to pronounce this right, but Telangana. And I was thinking, I've never even heard of that country. Where is that? And so I had to Google it and discovered, oh, it's not a country, it's a state in India. Um, so that's how I knew you were from India. But have you lived in India your whole life?
yeah. This
Yeah.
is the place where I born, and I live
Mhm.
here.
Cool. Awesome. And actually, I did have one other question, which I wrote down, which is ask him how he pronounces his first name. So if I were going to guess, I would say Sai, but I don't know. How do you pronounce Sai?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, thank you. This was fun. I hope you're able to get some usable sound and video bites out of all of that and put it in a podcast. And good luck.
So as an observer, as a financial advisor, as a person who is into money, understanding person from all your life. So what do you say about my videos on YouTube?
I'm going to be honest, I haven't watched one yet. Um, I listened to you explain what you did, and I thought, okay, I'd be willing to do that. Um, but honestly, I've just been so crazy busy trying to work my two jobs that I never took the time to go watch one. But I'd still like to do that. I still want to see it, what they look like. But um, I just think it's great that someone your age took the initiative to recognize not just that there's a lot of experience and wisdom out there, but you put together a way to actively go grab some of it from different parts of the world, and you're trying to assimilate all of that up here somewhere in your head, and I mean, there's no way that's going to hurt you. I mean, that's just going to be super valuable, I would think, um, when you find yourself talking with other people your own age, or other coworkers. The advantage you're going to have by having been exposed to and thought about these different viewpoints, and what makes them different, right? And in some cases it's because the government is different, and in some cases it's because the geography is different, right? These people live in a desert, so they've got to do things one way, and these people live next to the ocean, so they can do something a little different. And young and old, and I just think it's wonderful, and I wish you the best of luck with it. And I'm gonna keep your contact, and 10 years from now, I'm going to expect to be able to Google your name and find great things that you've done.
Definitely. And I'll expect your message also. I will save your contact too. And so at last, do you want to say any valuable thing to the world who is listening and watching you?
Oh my goodness. When I think, and again, recognizing all of my clients are Americans, living in America. I've been doing this a long time, and when I really think about what separates the people that I think did well specifically with their finances versus the people who didn't, I guess there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first one is, in today's world, with loans and credit cards and all sorts of other ways, it is way too easy to spend more than you make and think that you'll catch up later. And I've never seen anybody really be able to catch up. So the people that succeeded that I'm familiar with, they always lived within their means. And they all had a plan. I know some people don't like structure, and they don't like rules, and they feel that a plan somehow limits them or locks them in, and they just want to be able to make it up as they go. And for some things in life, that's great. But for your finances, I've never really seen that work. Everybody that I've seen that has managed to accumulate wealth, and whether that was a little bit or a lot, doesn't really matter. They all had a plan, and they stuck to it, and they would remind themselves every so often why these things were important, and the goals. I found it's not very effective to just set monetary goals, because, as I had mentioned earlier, if you need $300,000 to buy this house with a yard that you want, so that you have a place to raise your child and let your dog run around and have a little garden, raising $300,000 is not the goal. And if you make raising $300,000 your goal, you're going to get bored with it, and you won't stick with it over time. I've seen way too many people just give up, because it didn't have meaning. But if you think of it as, I want that house, that's my goal, and coincidentally, I need to accumulate $300,000 in order to get that, great. But that's a side detail. That's not the goal. The goal is, it's important to me to have this house because I want my child to I want to be able to have a dog, and I've never lived anywhere that allowed dogs, and I want to have a bedroom for the kid, and I want the kid to be able to go. I want there to be a swing set in back, and I want to get a one of those plastic wading pools, and have water fights with my kid and in the yard, and all those things are important to me, and I need $300,000 to do that. Right? The people that succeeded always remembered the why. Right? It was the house or whatever. I mean, I'm just kind of pulling that one out of thin air, but most of our goals in today's world do require money in order to attain them. But the money itself isn't the goal. You got to keep in mind what's really important, and then you'll be able to stick with the plan, and you'll be less likely to make stupid mistakes along the way.
Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you do, I'd love if you'd email me a link. But yeah, I purposely, there's in my line of work in the United States, there are a lot of regulations of things we're allowed to say and things we're not allowed to say. And for something like this, I just didn't go anywhere near all those things we're not supposed to say. And so, yeah, no problem at all.
Can I also put this video and audio clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Absolutely. Anywhere you want.
So do you want to say any, share any, thing of yours to my audience?
Well, I guess for those of you who live in the United States, I'm always looking for motivated clients to add to my practice. And you can look me up and find me. And I'm in today's world, you don't have to live where I live. I have clients that live all over the United States. But legally, I can't work with clients from outside the United States, even though that would be fun and I'd like that. But no, so if you're looking for a good advisor, I'm still growing, always looking for a good motivated client. And I already did the advice on what I think separates the people that I worked with for a long time who I really felt like they succeeded and they were happy and they were happy with me. We've already talked about that. So no, follow, particularly for your younger audience, pay attention to your heart. Try to get into a profession that you'll find interesting. Not just a profession that pays well. I'm old enough. I'm in my 60s, and so I've seen an awful lot of people who made way more money than I did, and then quit, or they just weren't happy with life because they hated their jobs. The only thing they liked about it was it had a good paycheck. And I'm the first to admit that if you need that for a short period of time, great. We can all put up with crap for a short period of time, but don't let that be your life. There's work-life balance is important, I guess.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for your valuable time. I hope you continue inspiring people like this, and I hope you make a lot of people smile.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And best of luck to you as well.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Take care.